What's up, fuckers? We are just hitting the halfway point in the NFL season. It's officially cold outside now. I got a lot of matchups to talk about since I just came back from my bye week. We got an exciting week of NFL football and fantasy matchups ahead of us. So without further ado, let's just dive right in.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We're now rounding out October and heading into the turkey season, which means that we just had our league's second meetup of the year. It was a blast. I hosted it at my house where I made carne asada tacos for everybody. Everybody brought in and contributed some food or some drinks. It was a grand time. We watched the Thursday night football game, Bills versus Buccaneers, which started off slow but ended up being a pretty exciting game at the end. As the group was gathering in the beginning of the night, it seemed like everybody brought their own case of beer. We didn't have enough space inside the cooler to fit them all. We had to put a box on the side. But let me tell you, by the end of the night, we had smashed almost all of the beer. It was all gone. I only had a small box left with just some stragglers left over. It was a sloshy night. I think what we can agree as the highlight of the night ended up being a 4-part competition gauntlet that I planned for everybody. All the league members got a chance to compete in a timed run that consisted of 4 challenges. The first challenge, the classic flip cup. In this challenge, you start off with the cup upside down and you have to flip it in a full rotation until it lands in the same position. Once competitors were able to complete that challenge, they hustled to the next area, which was a paper football flick. Competitors had 2 paper footballs to try to attempt to make it through the uprights in order to move on to the next obstacle. If neither of the paper footballs went through the uprights, it's a 5-second time penalty and you move on to the next obstacle. This one ended up being a lot of fun because it was pretty inconsistent. You couldn't tell who was going to be good at it, who got a lucky one, and it was also hard to find the paper footballs after they had been flicked randomly throughout the room. In the next challenge, it's the classic beer pong setup. Competitors had 3 beer pong balls to attempt to make 1 ball inside of the full rack of 10 cups. In the same style as the previous challenge, if you didn't make any of the 3 balls, you moved on to the next challenge, but with a 5-second penalty. The 4th and final challenge was a series of football-related trivia questions.
Who is known for his beast mode running style and play for the Seahawks? Marshawn Lynch.
After completing the beer pong shot, competitors were able to choose from 3 upside-down cards that had football trivia questions underneath. The competitors had to read the question out loud and then say the answer. Once the answer was said, the time was called.
Which black and gold NFL team plays its home games in the Superdome? That's the Saints. 38 plus 5. All right.
Now, it was all very well thought out and planned out ahead of time, but when it comes down to the execution of these types of things, everybody was drunk and we're all just trying to have a fun time. So the timing of it didn't really matter. We had to make decisions on the fly, and ultimately at the end, there was nothing on the line except for everybody having a good time, which, judging by the way it looked, sounds like was a success. Thanks to everybody that pulled up to the barbecue for the league meetup. You made the night extra fun. Like I had mentioned to Eric, you guys are the ones that make this league fun. I just come up with the ideas, and you guys do the rest. So thank you. And I look forward to the 3rd league meetup of this year, which is going to be on a Sunday night football game, November 12th, Raiders versus the Jets. Now moving on forward into some league housekeeping, it is with great pleasure that I am able to announce our trophy is on its way. The Derriere Destroyer Award has been ordered. Well, actually, it's sitting in my cart. As soon as I find out what Edwin's last name is, it's going to be ordered. But by the time you're seeing this episode, it's been ordered. Which honestly just leaves one question. What are we going to do for the awards ceremony? I haven't planned that out as of yet. I will come up with something and announce it to everybody in a timely manner, at least a month in advance, so that you guys are all able to plan with your schedules. But I do plan to have an awards ceremony at the end of the year. Maybe we'll do it during a playoff game or something. But that's where we will be giving out the trophy for the year. And we will also be giving the punishment for the year, which is the pink license plate cover. Stay tuned. I'll be mentioning the details for that on here as well as in the group chat as they develop. But just kind of put it in as a pin in the back of your mind for right now. We will be doing something in December to celebrate the end of another fantastic fantasy season. In some NFL player updates, it seemed like the theme for this week is quarterbacks going down and the fantasy values of the assets on those respective teams being dropped. Kirk Cousins is out. Ryan Tannehill is out. Stafford is questionable. Pickett is questionable. Fields is questionable. Watson is cleared to play but still not playing. So it has been a crazy roller coaster ride of injuries that are happening. It's honestly too much to go over. It really comes down to players are starting to drop left and right. There's a smorgasbord of injuries and replacements that are happening. Right now is the thick of fantasy football season. All you can really do is clench and pray. In tonight's matchup, the Thursday games continue to be bangers, with the 3-4 Tennessee Titans go to Pittsburgh to face the 4-3 Steelers in a battle of who the fuck is behind center? I mentioned that these bangers are continuing to roll because the 37-point over-under in this game is giving an implied point total of 16 to 21 in the favor of the Steelers, probably just because they're the home team. Players from the league that have stakes in this matchup, starting with the Tennessee side, Chef has DeAndre Hopkins, Raul has Derrick Henry, Henny has Tajay Spears, and Greg has Will Levis. On the other side of the ball, Greg also has the Steelers DST, Edwin has George Pickens, Eric has Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson, both in his lineup currently as of this recording, which I think he's going to have to make an adjustment on that. And the last player that's in one of the fantasy teams from tonight's matchup is on my bench, and it's Jaylen Warren. My prediction for the outcome of this game, since it's so low, give me the over, and I'll take Tennessee. Taking a quick look at the matchups for the rest of this week, looks like a lot of them are disgusting 37, 40-point over-unders. With the exception of a couple games, the Bills versus the Bengals is at 49.5. Cowboys-Eagles, both teams, 47-point over-under. But the real bread and butter of fantasy points that are going to be scored this Sunday is going to be in the Dolphins and Chiefs matchup with a 50.5-point over-under. Now, before we move on into this week's fantasy matchup review, I want to give a shout-out to the Tuesday Bluesers. Henny and Raul, this one is for y'all. Now let's go ahead and give a proper shout out to the Dub Club. Donnie, Greg, me, Christo, and Vaughn. Let's take a look at Donnie's matchup versus Raul. This was one of the two Tuesday Blues scenarios that happened in the league this week. On Raul's side, Josh Allen and Alvin Kamara went off hauling 31 points and 23 points respectively. Stephon Diggs was a pretty major letdown considering how well the rest of the Bills were playing in that matchup. On the other side, the stack of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown played a decent role in securing the dub for Donnie in the week. The Lions defense also did their 19 points for them. And Gus Edwards going off 80 rush yards, 3 rushing touchdowns for a total of 27 points on the week. Jamar Chase obviously got to have 100 yards and a touchdown every week, 15 points for that. And that's all she wrote for Donnie versus Raul. In the next matchup, Greg at 6-2 played against Edwin at 1-7. And it came out exactly pretty much how you'd expect. The biggest clapping of the week came from a courtesy of Joe Burrow, 3 passing touchdowns, 283 passing yards, and 43 rushing yards on top of that. 33 fantasy points for the week. Tyreek Hill can never have less than 100 yards and a touchdown, 17 points for him. And George Kittle hauled in 14, which was the maximum amount of points that anyone on Edwin's team scored for the whole week. Jordan Love scored 14. TJ Hawkinson scored 14. The 49ers defense, the kicker, and Adam Thielen all scored half of 14. Isaiah Pacheco finishing with -3 receiving yards for 3.7 points. Sound the alarm, prepare the escape hatch. Edwin desperately needs a win this week. And who does he play? Oh, it's Raul. Good luck. Next up, looking at my matchup versus Henny this week, which was the second Tuesday Blues scenario, courtesy of Josh Jacobs, hauling in 14.8 points. Honestly, I can't say I could have done it without CeeDee Lamb hauling in 29 And Justin Herbert on the Sunday night game, woof, came out with that robotic shit on his hand. Looked super weird, but it was working. Started off by completing 15 passes in a row before he ever had an incompletion. Besides that, Jordan Addison had a decent week for himself, 82 yards, 1 receiving touchdown for 14 points altogether. Darren Waller took 1 step onto the field and pulled his hamstring, so he was out after 4 yards. On the other side, Tua tag team with Travis Etienne is the big highlight of his matchup, hauling in 22 points apiece. Nobody else was able to break into the 20s or really past the 14 mark. A lot of them ending with single digits for this week, which ultimately was in my favor because going into this matchup, my odds did not look great, and I'm very happy that the football gods pulled it through for me. Next up, in another pretty big clapping matchup of the week, Christo at 4-4 defeated Eric at 5-3 with the total score of 116-72. Jalen Hurts doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the Philadelphia fan in Christo. 32 points for himself as a result of 4 passing touchdowns off of 319 yards. Amir Gibbs went off with almost 200 all-purpose yards and a rushing touchdown for a finishing box score of 26.9. Tyler Lockett did decent with Jake Elliott and the Cowboys also having a strong finish. Josh Reynolds, yikes, negative 3.7 points on the week. That fumble rule is a bitch. Another person who had negative points for the week, Patrick Mahomes. What? Finishing with negative 1.36 points, 241 pass yards, 2 interceptions, 20 rushing yards, 1 fumble. This does not look like the Patrick Mahomes that anybody expected to see this year. And I don't know if I'm worried about the Chiefs, but it's been more than just one of these performances where it is kind of something where you got to keep an eye on. Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey, 23 points, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. Everybody else had a pretty calm performance, which is why he only finished with the total score of 72.94. Eric is going to look to bounce back in his matchup against Donnie with a crippled team. A lot of invested roster capital on the Lions who are on a bye this week, so Eric has a little bit of an advantage. We'll have to see if Donnie can swing for the fences and pull something off. And in the last matchup that we have to review for this week, this one was a really close one as well. Vaughn played up against Chef. Vaughn played up against Chef in a matchup where he was in the lead for almost the entire game. Chef was hoping that he would be on his way to a comeback, pending the performance of Davante Adams in the Monday night game. He was hoping to pull off a 3rd Tuesday Blues for this week, which I think would have been a record. But Davante Adams has been kind of a meme this week, especially with the way that Jimmy Garoppolo played in that last matchup. There was 2 wide open touchdowns where Davante Adams literally just had to make the catch and go and run it in. But he was egregiously overthrown. And so I understand his frustration. There's clips of him, hanging his head on the sideline, smashing his helmet into the bench. But what can you do? He can't throw the ball to himself and then go run and catch it. So we'll see what the Raiders can do to bounce back in the rest of this season. I'm going to be at the game on Sunday watching my Giants play up against the Raiders. Hopefully the Giants can hold Davante Adams to another 7 targets for 2 receptions and 11 total yards of a performance for the week. Looking at the rest of the players in this matchup, you can see why it was a double-digit scoring week for both of these teams. There's players on both sides that finished with a total of 1 point or 4 points or 5 points. The only one that really went off was A.J. Brown with a 2-touchdown game, 25 points hauled in through the air. Barkley, Swift, Mixon, and Eckler, all the running backs from this matchup, did decently. Ultimately, the winner in this low-scoring game was Vaughn. Chef was not able to creep back on Monday night to give Tuesday Blues to Vaughn. Chef going into next week is playing against me, where I'll be hoping to put him at 1-8, and he'll hope to put me at 4-5. All right, and one last thing before I sign off for the week. Y'all know what's coming. Alright, so I don't have the ranking differentials because I've been doing these every couple weeks or so. But Raul has had a stranglehold on first place all throughout the season. Greg is now in second place with Eric in the grasp for third. Cody is in number 4 with Vaughn dead smack in the middle. I'm right behind Vaughn at 6 with Christo, Edwin, Donnie, and Henson taking up the last 4 spots. Now, one thing that I did find interesting while I was updating the power rankings for this week, I have a strength of schedule ranking formula as part of these rankings, and I just thought I could bring something up that's a little interesting. So the average strength of schedule is somewhere between 3 to 4 schedule points, let's call them. It's a mathematical formula. What I thought was interesting was, by far, Cody and Edwin have had the hardest schedules out of everybody. Both of them are sitting at 5 points and above. Cody is at 5.95, almost 6 points for opponent schedule difficulty. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Henson and Hristo are chilling, kicking their feet up with the schedule difficulty point of only 2.4 and 2.8. You guys are looking good, but you're kicking back. You haven't played a lot of hard matchups this year. So, keeping those things in mind, I'd watch out for the second half for you guys that have either had too easy or too hard of a schedule, because things might be changing up a little bit for the rest of the season. That's going to do it for me this week on the pod. It's always right around this time of the season when things start going into the back half of the year and they start going even faster and crazier. And man, it's like I'm already starting to miss it. So let's enjoy the rest of the weeks that we have in this fantasy and NFL season as we go into the lovey-dovey part of the year, being thankful for our friends and family, and then celebrating the holidays and the beginning of the new year. But let's not get there too quick. We got 10 more weeks of football left and 9 more weeks of fantasy, which means plenty more episodes on the show where I'll catch you on the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast.
Wanna hear you go.